Good morning and happy Easter. Happy spring. I listened this week to the video of Dorothy McAloney, Dal Holtrop, and Christy Hayashida sharing their experiences as members of the search team. If you haven't done that, I highly recommend it. You get a sense of the incredible effort the search team used in working through the large list of interested ministers, winnowing down the list to a few, and then working to come to consensus about which one was the best match for First U. You will also hear the excitement and joy that developed between the search committee members as they worked through their differences and were able to be authentic and honest with one another. So this is my first resurrection story. When I first met all of you back in August 2 years ago, some of you shared your fears that no minister was going to want to come to First U, that there would be no one that would love them. How far from the truth that is. You will have your chance, those of you who weren't part of that search, to learn this firsthand, although for a while it will be on Zoom. You were given a false impression of yourselves and the congregation, although I think underneath you always knew that it was wrong. I'm excited for you and happy that you will see for yourselves how much you are worthy of respect and love from a really excellent minister. It is such a testament to the resilience of this congregation that the coronavirus hasn't derailed this process. The virus is just an opportunity to show your resilience in the face of it. Today is Easter, and in the Christian lexicon, that the day that Jesus was resurrected from the dead. But Jesus was killed by those who were afraid that he would teach people about a power within themselves that didn't depend on elected office or the might of weapons. His power was his understanding of human nature and his desire that everyone become free from oppression. He challenged the idea that some people are better than others because of their gender, ethnicity, wealth, or station in life. He challenged the idea that oppressors must win the day, that the oppressed have no power. He challenged the idea that we must be fearful about money. He challenged the fear that we won't be enough or that we are not worthy. But how very far from what he taught Christianity has come. Jesus never spoke about original sin. He taught that we have inner strength. He said that we are so loved that we needn't worry about where our clothing and food will come from. He affirmed the leper, the prostitute, the beggar as worthy, even though society rejected them. He taught that kindness and compassion are more important than any notion of purity or superiority or law. The other and perhaps most important point was he spoke about the here and now, a way of being in relationship now and what it could become in the future if we practice compassion. He envisioned a whole earth ruled in this way. He called it the kingdom of God. In his parables, he sought to reverse human expectations of rewards and punishments, and he audaciously proclaimed that the first would be last and the last first. Insiders would be outsiders, and the rewards of faith would be intrinsic, not extrinsic. Faith for Jesus was not a set of beliefs, as it has come to mean in the popular usage. Faith was a basic trust in the goodness of creation and life, and consequently in ourselves in right relationship. Robin Myers, a biblical scholar, wrote a book called Taking Jesus Back from the Church. Here is an example of a true resurrection story that Myers experienced. A woman in his own congregation spent more than a decade despising him, or at least he thought she did. He was too liberal and had the deacons of the church remove the flag from their fellowship hall. She didn't accept his explanation that the church should be welcoming to all, not just Americans. She began to intentionally avoid him. If she saw him walking toward her, she would turn and walk away. It was her church, but he was not her pastor, she would say to other people. She wouldn't speak to him at all. Near the end of her life, she issued an ultimatum. If he did not insist that the congregation sing Battle Hymn of the Republic within 6 weeks, she would resign from the church. They did not sing that hymn in the time frame, and she did leave the church. After several years, word came that she was dying. She was in an ICU in a hospital near where he lived. He knew he should go and visit her, but he didn't want to. He reasoned that she was no longer a member and that he was probably the last person she would want to see. In fact, he imagined it might just kill her to see him. His wife, however, convinced him that he should go. When he got to the nurse's station, he sent word in to her that he was there, giving her the chance to tell him to go away. Surprisingly, she welcomed him in. He stood in the door, looking at all of the tubes and life support equipment attached to her. She motioned him in. Before he could say a word, she lifted herself up and wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him on the mouth. "I'm so glad you came," she said. They talked for 2 hours, catching up on children, the church, and the sad state of the world. She died the next day. Myers wrote, "Some people would argue that this is not a resurrection story and has nothing to do with Easter. That's unfortunate." Here is another resurrection story told by Harvey Cox, professor of theology at Harvard Divinity School and author of When Jesus Came to Harvard. He had a hard time explaining the resurrection to his students, but he said, "I told them I was surest about it when I was locked in a Southern jail during the Civil Rights Movement and heard the young Black people with whom I had been arrested singing 'We Shall Overcome' at the top of their lungs in the next cell." Jesus spoke in stories of personal struggle. By wrestling with our conventional thinking, our greed and fear in relation to others, we find our greatest strength in reality. Jesus challenged us to love our enemies and repair our broken relationships before all else, even prayer. There are many stories about Jesus healing people, even raising them from the dead. I would agree with renowned biblical scholar John Dominic Crossan when he said, "I do not think that anyone, anywhere, at any time brings dead people back to life. But I do know that we can, with the right desire, reanimate our lives, our thinking, our feelings, and that other people help us to do that." This healing story from the Bible is one of my favorite. See if you respond to this intuitively rather than literally, and if it reminds you of anything in your life or the life of the church. Here it is. "Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for a feast of the Jews. Now there is in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, a pool, which is in Aramaic called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. The myth was that angels would come down and stir up the waters periodically, and that the first person who got into the pool would be healed." That's where we get that song, "God's Gonna Trouble the Waters." One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat and walk." At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. Later, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning or something worse may happen to you." This is a wonderful allegorical story. Who doesn't have paralyzing patterns of thinking that have been carried around in them for most of their lives? We feel at times that we lack the power to be our own person because we open our mouths and our mother's or father's or our culture's voice comes out of us before we can even think about what is really best to say or do. So Jesus is saying we don't have to lie on this bed we've made or that has been made for us. We don't have to be limited by who we've been told we are. We can stand up and walk. We can be our own person, regardless of what our family expects, regardless of the depression, the voices that say we should be afraid, the apathetic voices, the ones that say we are not enough. We can stand up and walk, and to not do so, Jesus calls sinning. Not living who we really are in the present is the worst sin, because all others follow from it. Greed, violence, hatred, fear, racism, classism, sexism, everything we do that is destructive comes out of misunderstanding our real power. Myers wrote, in a capitalist society where money measures the value of almost everything, no one ever thinks that enough is enough. In a society that elevates competition to the level of a sacred spectacle, we are always being reminded that we fall short of someone else's prowess and expertise. In a celebrity culture, most of us are peons. In an entertainment culture, most of us are spectators. In a consumer culture, we are all just 3 easy payments away from rock-hard abs, easy salad preparation, or a lucrative career in real estate. Meanwhile, we wake up feeling unworthy. May all of us dare to find the strength to take up our mats and walk, to be healed of fear and doubt, to offer words of encouragement and insight to each other, and to follow the way of compassion. May it be so.